Hi everyone, welcome to the CCCX update and another fantastic interview for you guys this edition with Chris Holt from AllThingsCX. Since first starting in telecoms as a placement student 20 years ago, not that you know it to look at him, Chris has worked for some of the most recognizable names in the industry: NICE, Ring Central, Vodafone, Dimension Data. And at the start of this year, he moved into the partner world to join All Things CX as CX Strategic Director. So thank you for joining me, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me, James.
My pleasure. And Chris and I have spoken over quite a wide period of time. And as happens when people come on and we do these interviews, there was something that, I thought would be really useful for the audience to hear. And he came up with this brilliant little theme for our conversation: should I stay or should I go? We'll talk about the whys and the wherefores of that later on. But really, it's about that journey from a big vendor over to partner side, and how the change to adding value occurs, and how you start to look at the impact that your career is having for customers in those different environments, and then what the future holds for them as well. So something that perhaps a lot of you might be thinking about in terms of your own careers as well. So we'll jump straight in on that by saying, look, yeah, Chris, you and I first spoke when you were working at NICE and having a very successful, very impactful career there. However, you've chosen to make the change and join All Things CX. So firstly, tell us something about that business, and then what were the triggers, or I guess maybe the feelings that led you to make that change a bit earlier in the year?
Yeah, so All Things CX, we're a specialized communications and CX consultancy. So what really appealed to me was I knew All Things CX. I'd worked with them at NICE and at Ring Central, and was very aware of just the caliber of people there and the way they do things, which is to lead technical change for customers, making sure that it's not just a case of here's the new shiny toy and go and figure it out. It was very much putting an arm around people, seeing it through from that initial discovery stage, and even going in and doing discovery for customers, and then bringing it all the way through, successfully implementing that. Can't say that word properly. And then through the life with the customer, making sure that that shiny toy becomes a reality, and that they can deliver that business change they were seeking to start with and deliver that ROI.
Fantastic. I think that's something that is sometimes missing in the partner world, isn't it? Is that joined up full end-to-end partnership approach. And it's, as you say, I know All Things CX as well as a business, and I've seen that in practice from some of the work they've been doing as well. Thinking about yourself, it can be daunting to take that career step away from a bigger company to a smaller one, because there's no doubt there's a difference in size between these two if we're comparing back to NICE. But are there factors that positively impacted that consideration for you from moving to a big company to a smaller one?
Yeah, massively. And I realized I only answered half of the first question as well. So for me, I mean, there were no negative triggers for leaving NICE at all. It was all a positive of what All Things CX could bring and the difference I could make. And for me, it was the autonomy. So being able to be in charge of my own destiny. You'll hear a lot of people talk about that kind of thing, but actually being closer to the action and say at the coalface. But I'd become quite removed from having a direct impact. So I knew I was having an impact across a wider business and across partners, and got some lovely messages when I left. But I wanted to take an opportunity and go and make a difference there, and then see that through the life of it. And that's something that when you become bigger, it's harder to be involved to that degree. So I didn't want to just sell the dream. I wanted to make that a reality with exceptional delivery, and that was the key thing for me. It was also looking at things, so it talks about autonomy, but also a positive work-life balance. So when you go to larger and larger businesses, even you're working across regions, the better you work, the more you get known, the more it's like, oh, can you join this, can you help with this, can you do that? And part of me loved that. Part of me was also like, something has to give, something has to be more sustainable here. And for me, that was being part of a smaller team where, again, you're involved with just as much stuff, but you are directly involved. So you can straight away see the impact your energy is giving.
Yeah, I certainly hear that a lot from people that are considering a career change. Is that, I guess, direct involvement with customers, that transparency to the impact they're having for the customer, a little bit more accountability and responsibility, and of course, work-life balance. I mean, that's been one of the topics as it comes to, employment well-being and career longevity over the really since the COVID period, and it changed the way that people think about work. And one of the other things that I think you're sort of touching upon there as well is the satisfaction in the work, and I know for a big part of that for you is adding value, and so whether that's adding value to a team, customers, or an employer, and yeah, how does value creation for those different groups feel different moving from a vendor to a business like All Things CX?
I think from a business point of view, every decision is important. By being small, we can be more agile and we can react to those needs. So at the vendor level, it's macro, it's very conceptual. You can do something, but it might take 6 months, 9 months, 18 months. We were doing some great work with enablement, but realistically, your partner network might take 18 months to take a concept and then bring it through to a deal. Whereas when you're with a smaller business, every action counts. So you can create value straight away with every interaction, internally, be it upskilling, knowledge, even enthusiasm. So, one of the reasons Darren brought me into All Things CX was to look at the strategy of why are we doing this? Who should we look at in the marketplace? All of that kind of good stuff. And early on, I'm a bit like an enthusiastic puppy at times. I will be like, "Oh, guys, there's this, there's this. Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that?" And the big thing is why? Why are we doing that? And actually, we put a pause on things after looking at a few different things. And I was like, "Guys, we're going to have a session. We're going to talk about why. This is why we are looking at this vendor. This is why we are looking at this bit of enablement. This is why we're doing this." And you can start to then see the dots being joined up. It's no longer randomly throwing ideas at people. This is why we're doing this. And then once they've got the why, then you can really start to build something and empower that team. So whilst we're small, we're pretty mighty with what we do and with what our PS can deliver. And we've gone to our team and said, well, this is only the start. Look at all of these things we're now looking to do and start to see where your own path might be, see where your own speciality might be, where you might want to grow. It's not impossible to do that at a large company. I had a lot of autonomy at NICE, but at the same time, for example, that kind of thing can get a bit diluted. The bigger you get, the more decision processes it has to go through, for example. Whereas here, we will review something, we'll have a discussion. There might be a couple of us involved and go, all right, we're going to do that. And then at that point, decisions made and on we go.
Yeah, again, I think these are things that people consider if they're in a big company, and this doesn't just have to be about people sat there in a big company thinking right now, is this the right time for me to move to a smaller business? It could just be moving to a different business. But I think all the topics that you're talking about are things that people consider, but actually hearing it from a first-hand perspective of these are differences that I've experienced and the positive factors, and it's not, and as you quite rightly said, nothing negative about where you were. It's all about positivity and moving forward. And I think in people's careers, there are times to be on board the cruise ship that is slow to turn but has all the bells and whistles and is lovely, and there are times to be on board a speedboat, and I think depending on where you are, if you sometimes feel it's time, it probably is time actually, and I think the sooner the better, quite frankly, if you're going to move into a great business and it's a business that and leadership that you trust, and all the things that you've been able to gain by moving to All Things CX. And many people I speak to are considering, as I say, changing jobs or perhaps setting up on their own as well. But one of the challenges they have, I think, is really quantifying and understanding their value outside of their current team and role. And you mentioned something that really struck you after you resigned from NICE, and I thought it really crystallized that. So tell us about your experience and tell us about the handover list.
Yeah, so in fact, the last couple of roles, it's been a similar case of I put together a handover list of things I'm working on, and you realize very quickly you're into like Lord of the Rings territory of there's like 50 things on it. And part of that stems from me not being able to say no, which, I'm 20 years into the industry, I'm starting to learn sometimes don't actually have to say yes to things. But it's also the reason I started quantifying things, which it came from feedback a few years ago, where one of my mentors said, look, we know you're doing a great job, but sometimes senior leadership don't understand the value or the impact that you bring to a business. So, and that at that time foxed me. I was like, but you're telling me I'm having a good job. Why can't other people see it? And it's like, the more senior you get, the more 10,000, 50,000 feet view you get of people at the coalface, we'll say. And I realized what I was good at was getting on with the job, but not necessarily articulating what I bring to it, or even having the ego to say, I did this. Especially, it's a very British thing. Oh, I didn't do this. It must be someone else. And I got the feedback. Look, just every quarter, and this is feedback that I then give people that I mentor as well. Every quarter, write down what you've done in a presentation form, in a document, however you want to do it. But every quarter have something. And the easiest thing is to go back through your calendar. So I keep quite a diarized calendar. Anything that I'm working on goes in there. And then I put together my list of this is what I've done. And then once you've done what you've desired, put that together, you know what you've done. That might surprise you. Be like, oh, actually, you get to the end of the quarter, you think, I haven't done anything. Or you get to the end of the week. My first couple of weeks here, I was like, I don't know if I've done anything. And I'd sit on a call at the end of the week and down go, oh, that's been fantastic. We've done loads. And I'm like, huh. And then you start to realize, actually, you're doing loads. It's just, I take that for granted almost because I'm, I can be, I just get into a groove with things. But when you start to list things out, you can then start to think differently as well of not just that this happened, but then the value to the business. So I had, for example, one of my leaders was like, yeah, there was 1 year where we doubled the average sales volume for contact center and we increased win rates whilst expanding a team. So tenure went down, win rates went up, value doubled. I didn't know that, but we worked through the list that I've been working on. He's like, well, this was the outcome for the business, so you contributed to that. So it's not a case of constantly updating your CV as such, but knowing that value, knowing what you can articulate, what it brings to it, and then also that allows you to look at your job in a different way. You can get very siloed. So I was in solutions engineering, so you consider that to be pre-sales. And you can sometimes get a little bit siloed of this is what I do. And actually you start to see the impact and the benefits that you have. If you do a good job, then actually the better you do in discovery, potentially you're actually taking 20% off delivery times because your PS teams aren't having to go and data dip or understand the why quite so much. But the other feedback I give to people is to be more proactive. So it's something that I learned as well. I took that feedback about not maybe being seen, being that impact being seen, and I took that to be, well, what if I tell my story a bit more, and what if I actually have some fun with it? And we joked about me being 20 years in the industry, but probably for the first 15, maybe 18 of those, there was work Chris and there was home Chris. And one is silly and whimsical and really is a bit of a plonker. And one is work Chris, and it was a very much this is how I should work. And then you'd get a feedback of, oh, people, they can't quite work you out, they can't you seem very serious. And it was always, well, it's a work call, so we've got to get on with the work and we've got to do that. And weirdly, funny enough, once you start being yourself a bit more, you enjoy it a bit more, and you have a bit more fun with things. So I started to loosen up a bit more. And also I found just telling a story and being on LinkedIn more regularly, pictures of the dog, he's down here at the moment, pictures of the cat sitting on my keyboard at 5 in the evening, just being out there and being real really helped as well to elevate my perception of me as well and what people thought of me. So yeah, that really helps. So if you are looking at doing any of this, it's one, understanding your value, but also being in control of your own narrative as well of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. So much in that just resonates with conversations that I have on a regular basis. And I think there's some fantastic practical tips just in that as well. Yeah, one of the things that people might have been in a company for a number of years and then they come to write their CV and they're head scratching thinking, well, what do I put? And actually, if they're undertaking that simple exercise that you're talking about, even just for themselves, looking at their calendar quarter by quarter, noting down things they've achieved and just keeping that, then when they come to that CV point, even if it's or just end of year reviews, whenever you need to look back and quantify the value you've added, whether it be for output or whether it be just for looking back at yourself for a well-being point of view and saying, do you know what, because I totally empathize with what you're saying. I can go through weeks and sort of be there a bit head scratching and thinking I'm not quite sure what I got done there, because getting things done in my job looks a certain way, but actually there's lots of other stuff you're doing, and then you look back and you go, oh yeah, and if you then track that to an outcome, you say, oh, actually that was really useful, even though it didn't look like the way I thought that week would have looked, perhaps. And the other thing is saying that absolutely right about freeing yourself up to do your job in your way, and things like this, right? You mention it there, the dog and the cat and stuff. Being able to now have a little insight more into people's lives through things like this, I think has allowed people to be themselves a little bit more. And that's something, again, with a big company to small company move as well, I think that comes hand in hand a little bit more as well. It can vary from company to company, and there are certainly businesses that I deal with where it's still less common than others that actively encourage it. But I would always encourage everybody to allow more of themselves into how they do their job, because if you've been doing it a long time, you're probably very good at it, and it's you that's doing it, not some corporate persona, if you like. And on the subject of you and personality, I think that feeds really nicely into, we called this interview "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" because of something you said in our conversation. So tell us a bit more about the significance of that song.
Yeah, well, look, my route to the Clash was the traditional one. So now 19, I'm sure that's how most punk fans got into the Clash. But I've always had like the Now albums and things growing up. I was always into music, and that's always resonated whenever there's been a job change on the horizon, whether it's going through interviews or just tentatively seeing what's there and deciding against. I'd be walking home from work or walking the dog, and I'd listen to it, and it would be a great way of being that pros and cons list, of going, well, if I stay, it's this, and if I don't, it's this. What do I look through? And kind of weighed that up in my mind. And actually, weirdly, this time around is the only time I haven't listened to it, or the only time I didn't listen to it this time, because the moment these conversations happened with the team at AllThingsCX, it was like, well, actually, I could have continued. I've walked away from the dream job to many people. It's at a vendor with all the toys, all cutting edge, and you get to be that person that is helping other people grasp it. It's a great job. I was like, well, I could do that, and I would still be very, very fulfilled. But this then became something of, this was completely different. It was a complete variation in what I could potentially do, and a completely different destination long term as well. So that became a very, very different question. And yeah, it was the first time I didn't consult the Clash on whether I should stay or go with a job change. It was very much, yeah, let's just do it. Let's
I
go
like
for
that.
this.
Consult the Clash. I don't know if I don't know if I can call that a practical tip, but it's. I think having that consistency running through your job choices is fun. I like that, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that they will go through a certain process when they're considering and weighing up their options, whether it's listening to music, whether it's taking a walk with the dog, or with a friend or a family member or something. There's going to be something that frees their mind to really weigh up those pros and cons, and it just was so apt when you said it. And so finally, look, things are obviously going really, really well at All Things CX, and that's brilliant. So what does the future hold for the business, and what should we all be looking out for on LinkedIn or whatever when it comes to you and the business?
Well, look, I think as we're in CX, it would be remiss for me not to talk about AI for about 2 to 10 minutes. But whilst I joke, this is a really exciting time. I see CX as going through a bit of a revolution at the moment, one that is really, really exciting. There are phenomenal players ever in the market. We partner with a few of them. So we partner with the likes of Ring Central, Sprinkler, and Nice, and they're all doing their own things pretty amazingly. So where we see the future for all things CX is just growing what we do and taking businesses to that promised land of that CX revolution and putting an arm around people. So, every business leader is probably looking at, well, what does AI actually mean to my business? And, it's our job as a consultancy and as a partner to these businesses to put an arm around them and actually make that, because their reality might be that they've just got a phone system on a wall at the moment that doesn't quite do what they need to out of hours. So it's taking them from that, well, you don't need to go all bells and whistles to start with. We take you on that journey and then you build it. You don't build it on sand, essentially. There's no point in having a shiny toy if, you can't actually do the basics. From us at All Things CX, there's a lot to be excited about, and there'll be constant updates. So we've got LinkedIn, we've got a YouTube channel, which is more demos, playing around with platforms, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to be playing around with that a bit more. We've been threatening TikTok. Not sure about that one just yet. We're still threatening that, but watch this space. But it's going to be for us proof in the pudding. So taking customers on that journey and then talking about that as well in the future.
Awesome. Well, I'll put a link when I put this up on the newsletter to Chris's LinkedIn, to All Things CX as well, so people can go and follow them and keep their eyes on everything that's happening, and maybe go and check out that YouTube channel as well. So yeah, Chris, I really appreciate your time, and as always, it's been fun talking to you, sir.
Thank you very much, James. I think the closing comment for me is, in the past, it used to be, what's the worst could happen? And realistically now, when you go through that, whether you consult the clash or not, it's, well, what if it does work out? What does the upside look like?
Love it. That's it. Positive thinking all the way. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, James.